Yeah, that's good to know. Well, hello, Sandy. Happy podcast day.
Amy, happy podcast day. We've both been doing a little bit of traveling, and
Yeah.
so I'm not going to lie, I'm excited to see Amy's face. And we did a little bit of catch up, but we just have to stop ourselves because it's like, oh, save it for the podcast.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't seen you forever, but I feel like I'm reconnecting to everybody today because I've been sending out emails because I've been almost gone from Kansas City for about a month. I've had some spots here and there that I've been back, but for the most part, not during the week. And so it's kind of, I was like, okay, I'm back. Let's reconnect. So, all those coffee dates I shared that I did before I left.
Amy,
Yeah,
where are
it's
you? Yeah,
reconnecting with all those people.
they probably thought you were ghosting them, right?
I know exactly.
And for me,
I
because
don't want to do that.
I felt how you felt when I got back from Patagonia. I wasn't gone for a month, but I was gone for a solid 2 weeks, and then we were sick. We had RSV, so we were sick, or we thought we had RSV. I guess it's not confirmed or denied. But I was like out of commission for a month from being out with people. Now I'm just back from a quick visit to my parents, and I feel like I'm back to Durango normal, is how. So I've got my new vintage Nike shoes on, what sweatshirt and shorts am I going to wear? The dog is walked. I'm in my Durango normal routine. And do you have a Kansas City
Yes,
normal
that's
routine?
exactly. I do. And that's exactly what today feels like is it's like, all right, I am back into my routine. Like I walk the dog, I am planning dinner, all this stuff that I haven't been doing for a month.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
like the fun, but I like the routines too.
I completely agree. It was fun not having a routine and not having to think about dinner, but it's also fun to be back. And I should say, I'm not really planning dinner tonight because we have a great event we're going to. I'm so excited. We're going to see a Chiefs alumni
Oh,
because the draft is in Kansas City this week.
wow,
And
cool.
so there's a Chiefs alumni dinner that we're going to. I know I'm super excited. So I have my
Well, I
red
gotta ask,
fingernails. I'm all
ooh,
ready.
I've got to ask one question, move on to the topic. And I love the fingernails. Mine are Durango planting. But I'm going to
Yeah.
wait till after all the planting and then get those done. But if I had an event, I'd be in. So my question is, was Tom so happy to have you back?
Yes, I think so. He greeted me with flowers at the airport. So I think he was
Oh,
happy.
that's
How
sweet.
about Garrett? Was he happy to have you back?
Yeah, because back to the routine, the point is, and the dog was happy too, right? Is we get back into our routines,
Yeah.
and our spouses are used to us being part of those routines. And some things are sweet and back to the flowers, and there's other things that, like, I typically walk the dog. I'm sure there are things that you typically do, back to planning dinner, that Tom had to fend for himself. And absence does make the heart grow stronger, right?
Yes, I completely agree. All right. So today we are talking about Mean Girls, and we're actually talking about this hold on, relational aggression because I've kind of been looking this up. Mean Girls is that the go to the movie, and it's the term we use when people are being mean and bullying us, and a girl, and it's identified as girl, but that perpetuates that it's only girls because it does happen across all genders, and it's just not women, so or girls for that matter. So anyway, this whole topic started because there was a situation that I experienced and I kind of mentioned it. And then we are like, well, let's dig into that a little bit more and talk about mean girls and this behavior and how we respond to it, what it is, how we've experienced it and how we respond to it.
And I would say we want to be politically correct and say it's all different genders, but there's a reason there's a movie called Mean Girls, because it tends to be gender specific, that for whatever reason, and this perplexes me, I don't understand that when confronted, or that it's a knee-jerk reaction, more so in women than men. I think more so in girls than boys. Maybe boys duke it out more. I don't know. I'd love to have the discussion, but I think if you were to talk to school teachers, they would say they deal with this type of behavior more with girls than boys, probably more petty than physical. Is that?
Yeah.
And maybe you
Yes.
found that in your research.
So that is one of the things that they said was that girls tend to do a little bit more of the spreading of the rumors, the gossiping, but the ostracizing, which is part of it, happens with boys too, where they get left out of things.
Mhm.
Intimidation, verbal insults, the name calling. That's pretty much across boys and girls from the research I was doing.
So with the research, does it say, and again, this is my experience with the girls, when I think of mean girls and situations and examples, usually they're doing things on the side and on the sly, kind of like the movie, we're going to feed her the power bars and have her gain weight and not tell her about it. It's not like I'm going to punch you in the face or I'm going to call you a name, but it tends to be more these little situations behind the back. And
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that was when I was reading through this, that was one of the reasons this is so hard to see and identify and stop because it's easy to see when someone physically shoves somebody. Like
right.
you can physically see that. You witness it and shoving is not acceptable. But the ignoring of somebody, that's a little bit harder to identify as being mean by
Mhm.
ignoring somebody. So that's why,
Starting a rumor and trying to get to where it began, starting a conversation, getting some momentum, negative momentum going. It's hard to finger.
right,
It's hard to say that
right.
person started it.
Yeah. So with that is the part of the biggest challenge with this type of aggression is that you can't pin it on a person sometimes. And you know what? I'm going to tell you, my kids, I think I've been very lucky. I had one of my kids had a friend who was mean and would comment on my daughter's outfit or how she did her makeup or just trying to be, she was just mean about it. And I remember my daughter in tears one time and I finally was like, all right, you can't control what this person's doing, but you don't have to be her friend. You can control your response, and your response doesn't have to be, you don't have to invite her over anymore. You don't have to engage in this. But then I was reading this and I was like, so is that the flip side of her starting to ignore and then being aggressive that way, or is that protecting? So I'm a little torn on how to understand when this goes bad and when it's not.
And how to deal with it, because I remember an example of work, and I was very young. It was one of my first jobs, and I was in my early 20s. And to this day, I have a guess, but I don't know what it was. But I literally had just started this job. There was only a handful of women. I tell you, 5 women that worked there, maybe a couple that were older, my mom's age, that worked in admin, but like of the similar peer group. And you always had to sign out when you went to lunch. And I started my first week at work. I saw they all signed out. They never asked me to go. And I thought, okay, whatever, they've got their own group. And then one time I was in an office and one called another and she didn't know I was in the office and she made some real snotty comment about me. And I thought she
Oh,
doesn't, and the other girl tried to cover it up and like, oh, Sandy's in here. And she said, oh, Freudian slip, or I can't remember what exactly she said, but my suspicions were real. They were having catty conversations about me. And back to Mean Girls, I'm stuck with it because I work there. And in reality, what actually did happen was they got to a point of tolerating me because I didn't react in a way that was fun. I just didn't react. I went to lunch with the guys, is what I did. I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. And I don't know what I did. And, I want to progress in my career. And then more women were hired, and the more they were diluted, maybe it wasn't as much fun. I don't know. I think I worked too hard, honestly. I think I showed up, and I think they felt uh threatened because I might make them look bad by working more hours or taking things home because I was very energetic with the new job.
Yeah.
But it was definitely Mean Girls, and it wasn't like a friendship at school where you find a new group. You're kind of stuck when there's
Right.
five women you're working with and you really want to make a go at this job. But yeah, I'm guessing in retrospect, they probably didn't enjoy the fact that I made friends with the guys and I got invited with the guys. It probably put a little bit of water on their, um, I guess, fun. Would it be fun, Amy? Is it fun to be mean? I wouldn't think it'd be fun.
Well, okay. So you touched on a few things that my research talked about. They were acting because they felt threatened. Okay. So that was probably, you were speculating that they might have felt threatened, which is typically why people have this mean girl mentality, is they want to it has to do with their self-confidence, and they want to put you in your place, and they want to make sure they're above you. So they kind of come together and they're like, oh, aren't we great? Isn't this person this? And they're not part of us. And so they kind of separate you, and then they elevate themselves and try to make you be less than them. So that was the first thing that you identified. But the second thing you said was your reaction was you just didn't engage. You moved on and you hung out with other people, and you didn't give them the energy, the response, because a lot of people thrive on that because they say it and they group together, and then they want your energy and response, and they want you to prove them right by how you respond, and you didn't. And so that's actually the advice that everything I read was, just be yourself, move on, and don't engage with it.
Which is sometimes easier said than done. And really, at the time, did I really think it through? I was just like, what in the world? I think the motivation to want to do well at the job trumped how they felt about me. So I was more inclined to make the clients happy and the partners happy. So maybe I was a brown noser. Maybe that was the problem.
Well,
Maybe I was a perceived brown noser, which could have come across that way, because that really, at the end of the day, when you're in the service industry, who needs to be happy?
the clients.
The client.
Right. Exactly. But okay, so yes, you might have been perceived as a brown noser, but and I love that you called yourself out for that. But also, you're there to do a job, and the other thing is, you didn't go to that job needing friends. So my guess is you probably had a very secure and good social network already. So you didn't walk into that job thinking, oh, I need this group of women for friendships. You already have that. You're at your job to do your job, which makes a difference on what you were wanting from that group of people.
So I have there's an interesting study, and I think we've just noted this before, that I've never really understood. Gallup talks about the top 5 things that make you happy at work. And one of the top 5, and I tell you, it's in the top 2, is having a best friend at work. And that always
Really?
struck me. Okay, so maybe we didn't talk about it here. That has always struck me as, I don't know, shocking, because it never has crossed my mind, I need to find a best friend at work. And I've always preferred to have my best friends. I like friendships at work, and some of them have grown to deeper friendships and long-term friends, but I do the opposite. I seek best friends outside of work. I mean, does that surprise you that a majority of people want a best friend at work?
Um, I think you can have best friends in all different areas. So that's what I'm thinking because I'm identifying when I worked in spaces, offices with groups of people, and I haven't done that for a really long time. But when I did, I remember identifying like my work best friend. Now, they were not my best friend outside of work,
But
but
it
I
was
did
work
have
best friend.
yes. So they were my work best friends. Like they were my person that I would have lunch with. They were my person that I would um, commiserate with or celebrate with, whatever was going on. They were that was my person. But none of those people, well, one of them, I would say, translated outside of work. Most of them stayed within work.
Mhm. And I think now that we're talking about Mean Girls and I give the other story, I can look at it with a different perspective. Maybe the opposite is you're not happy at work because you don't have a close friendship. So me being that person that everybody else hung out, it's kind of the flip side. Rather than saying, oh, people are seeking out having a best friend at work, they don't want to be alienated, not have somebody that they can truly count on in that capacity. They don't want to be alone.
They don't want to be alone. Yeah, they want to be able to, yeah, they want to have a friend,
They want to
which
have a
I
friend.
think is good. So this weekend I was watching something. There's these two guys who started a podcast since we're talking about friendships, and this is going a little bit off of the mean girl thing, but they these two men started a podcast, and I can't remember what the podcast is name. I'll see if I can figure it out before and I'll put it in the show notes if I can remember. But they were talking about men friendships. And right now, apparently, there is a friendship recession going on right now, which I was like, oh, I haven't heard this. And they said because people are working more from home, they don't have those work friends. They've learned to prioritize their family. So they're putting a lot of family in front
Okay.
of other
Okay.
activities, and they're missing these friendships. So, one of the tips, which I thought was very interesting, was to have three places. You need to be part of three places. One's home, usually, one's work. And if you're not in a work office, you need to find a place that feels like a work home. And then one other place so that you have this whole complete um, friendship opportunities.
Wow. Okay. So what happens when you work from home?
Well, that was the thing. That's part of the challenge is they're like, you need to, like me, myself, I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm trying to find all these networking, these other people that work at home and have a little bit of, coffees or happy hours or whatever it is to get together and have those connections because there's other people in the same boat.
And I suppose for me, I'd say it's two-part. It's if I'm giving a workshop in person or speaking engagement, and then also with my volunteer work with that it's business related with the chamber and with the entrepreneur society.
Yeah.
I show up for things, I show up for events, I have monthly meetings, I'm now president. And so I kind of feel like I'm going into work a little bit. I'm mentally preparing, and there's a group of people that are part
Yes.
of that posse, that we have our emails, we have our structure, there's structure to it.
Yeah. The other thing they said to have good friendships, the number one thing you have to do is show up. You just have to be there. And I was like, well, isn't that easy? You just have to keep being there and being a part of their lives. When invited to something, you show up. All
You know,
right.
we say that's easy though, Amy. I don't think it's easy for everyone. Because I think, I do a lot of things wrong. One thing I do right is I do show up. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to be there. But it shocks me the number of people that don't. And I don't know. It just shocks me. I would think if you if you're going to be a part of something, wouldn't you want to be all in if you're going to dedicate your time? But I don't think that always happens.
Right. Yeah. Very true. All right, let's move back to our topics. I apologize. I took us on I just thought this friendship recession was a very interesting concept that I had not heard about.
Very.
Um, so relational bullying, some things that signs of it, which were interesting, is eye rolling. Do you roll your eyes?
I've never been told I do, but what I get in trouble for is not being a great listener, or flirting without thinking first,
Yeah.
stopping a conversation. So I think I do it with my mouth and not my eyes would be my,
Yeah.
how about you? Are you an eye roller?
I'm not an eye roller. Um, I'm gonna say that I glaze over. Like, I just kind of like I check out
And I'm
when
told you
I
can read me like a book. And so like if I disagree with something, I think it's stupid, you can just look at my face and say, so
you can tell. Um, so another thing that people do is ignore giving the silent treatment, creating cliques, um, spreading rumors, gossiping, which, we had talked about gossip a little, and sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad if it's hurting other people. Intimidating others, cyberbullying. So this was the other one that popped up, which is new. I've never experienced cyberbullying at all.
very
But
rare. I mean, I've had a few things and I just delete them.
yeah. And then removing people from groups, chats, whispering loud enough so the other person can hear. I don't think I've done that. I used to do that to my dad quite a bit. It's just my mom and I used to do it, but we would whisper jokingly and think that maybe he's going to hear. So it was
Well,
a little aggressive.
the whole thing about being invited in or out of groups, the uh do you remember, was there a book called Queen Bee? There's something about the whole Queen Bee syndrome that a lot of times, like back to, I'll say with Mean Girls, there's a Queen Bee and she kind of organizes her bees to follow what she's doing. And then you can create these groups and bring people in or out. And it's kind of, you got to understand who the Queen Bee is, right? And what the
Right.
nature of the swarm. But I had a situation where, and it's an adult, and it was here in Durango where very early on, I was asked to be part of a group and I could tell who the queen bee was. And then all of a sudden they kept meeting and I was out of the group and I'm like, whatever. I just thought same thing. It's like, whatever, I'm too old. And, I sure like them. I don't know why. And then somehow I got invited again, but the queen bee wasn't there. And then the queen bee texted me and said, I feel like we're not getting along. Should we meet? And I'm like, I'm just doing my own thing here. You know what I mean? But it was
Right.
all posturing, right? Because if you really look at it, she was finding that the swarm was saying, oh, we don't really like how this feels. And
Yeah.
the long and short is she disappeared and created her new tribe. So I don't know.
Oh,
It
interesting.
it is interesting, but when you back to the pettiness and try behind the scenes, it can make your head spin trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. Completely. Completely. And that's one of the things that was repeated over and over is you cannot control what other people do or say. You can only control your response. And
Right.
that is the gist of this. Um, I spent last week with a group of people who are in hospitality. And what I witnessed in this group was the most wonderful thing because they were all so nice to everybody. I just kept watching them and I was like,
And
all
it was
right, all
genuine.
it was genuine. They were meeting people for 3 days, and some people were, not excited. Some people were kind of crabby. Some people were super nice. Most people were super nice, but there were all levels of, is this going to be fun to meet? And one lady, she was like, "Oh, my arch enemy was there." And I was like, I never even noticed through the whole event that her arch enemy was there. So I was like, I'm like, they just really were genuinely nice to everybody. And it was really fun to see all these people getting along and playing nice and not being clicky, because I have been around groups that are very clicky.
It's hard to, and it's such a great experience to be centered by women like that. I'm assuming, were they all women or not necessarily? Were they?
Probably 75%,
Yeah.
75% were women. Yeah.
But it's a good reminder because when you do encounter mean girls, and it happens at all ages. I've got a group of ladies in the neighborhood that are like in their 80s, and there's one that does things and doesn't invite others, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But the experience and influence of those that are really great about being inclusive, about being kind, about defaulting to that. I think it helps. So when you do experience the bad, the mean, that you can just walk away and say, it's not worth it. You know, I'm not, and find those people that don't fall in um, that label, right? Or that don't put themselves in that label. Cause it's a tough crowd.
It is a tough crowd. It's hard. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the real and the ideal of Mean Girls. And so what's the real?
The real is it's not always girls, it's also women and it's also men, it's people. We're using the term mean girls because we can all associate with it. So we're going to deal with people, as my husband would say, that are playing games for their own benefit. Um, they're there and they come not just in, you don't walk away from it when you leave grade school or high school. And
Right.
um, you're going to have to deal with it, right? I mean, I guess that's what do you think the real is?
I think the real is recognizing that their actions are not really about you. And it's usually their insecurities. They're trying to elevate themselves, which means pushing you down so that they look better amongst the group. Because my last experience, the one I shared from when I was at my conference, that was definitely what it was. It was like, here, let's all do this and let's let Amy's going to look bad and that's going to make me look better because I pointed it out and I'm pointing out that you all are on my side
Mm-hmm.
and she's wrong. And it was completely intentioned to make me feel less than all of them, especially the leader of that group. And so I keep going back. It's more about that person wanting to feel special and less about them wanting to make me feel bad. Like, I think they would have done it to anyone else in the same situation as I was in. Like, if it wasn't me, it would have been someone else, and they would have done the same thing to them to make this person feel better about herself.
So you're following your great advice of not taking it personally.
Yeah, I did. I tried as I'm still talking about it.
Hey, it's part of our podcast, Amy.
I know. But I did not in the moment, I just did not react, which I will say I do think that was the ideal of just sitting there, don't reacting, not giving it power, not giving it energy. Like, because I think when we react, that's the ideal. And also protecting other people from it. If you see it happening, trying to mitigate it as much as possible, which is hard.
And ignoring it. So my example of a recent one with women our age, I didn't have to do a lot. I just decided not to bite and did my own thing. And what's interesting is, you know, a lot of these ladies are super nice ladies. They've kind of broken away and we do other things and they've found other groups. And I think You don't have to go in and say, I'm breaking up this posse, and make it a big dramatic thing, but you're leading by example too. And just by walking away, you're walking away from that group might help somebody else to say next time when they're treated that way to say, leaving the situation. And
I'm
I
out.
think it
Yeah.
empowers others to say there's other options out there. And she seems to be perfectly happy outside the circle. So
Right. Exactly. And I think that's a huge part of it is just be happy. Surround yourself with people who make you better.
be kind, don't be mean.
Be kind.
Be kind.
Yes. Agree. All right.
I
Well,
mean,
thanks, Sandy, for the lovely conversation. It's always fun chatting with you.
all right, until next week.
All right. Talk to you later.